Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
I'm here in the jungles of the Yucatan, which is not the kind of place you'd normally expect to find an underwater kind of guy like me. But flowing beneath these forests are incredible underground rivers. And in places, holes in the forest floor like this one provide access to an amazing unseen world. The holes in the ground are called cenotes, from a Mayan word meaning sacred well. But not all cenotes look like a hole in the ground. Some appear at first to be ponds. Yet they all share one common trait: their openings to underwater caves and caverns. Mexico's Riviera Maya in the Yucatan Peninsula is a vast rainforest filled with hundreds of cenotes. There are thousands of miles of underground rivers here. My adventure begins first thing in the morning at H2O Pro Diving in Tulum, where we load our gear into a van to begin the journey out into the middle of nowhere towards the cenote. My guide Marco Wagner is an experienced cave diving instructor who will keep me out of trouble with a safe introduction to the sport of cenote diving. So I can hardly wait to see this thing. Unless you're specially certified for cave diving, you should only dive with a local guide who knows the cenote well. Today we're diving a famous cenote called Calavera.
Calavera means translated skull. And you see the big mouth and you see the small eyes. These are all the small eyes where we see them in the dive where the light beams are coming in and they look like disco lasers.
Wow, this is really way out in the jungle. How do you think anybody found this place?
I mean, they get explored by the owners of the land also itself. They discover the cenotes because they have huge pieces, huge chunks of land. And actually when they chop the trees down and they make trails, they found the cenote also from, cenotes are here for the ancient Mayans also, which were like sacred wells for them. That's where the cenote is coming from, the word. It's coming from the Mayan word tonot, that means sacred well.
So the Mayans, this was a really important source of water, or?
They also used the groundwater as well, but also for sacrificing for the gods. Some cenotes were used. But there's still the groundwater also still comes from these underground rivers what we have here in the peninsula.
Wow, that's cool. It's deep too. So we're gonna have to jump down. How far is that?
That is about 2.50 meters, 3 meters more or less.
Echo! Oh yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Now it's time to begin our dive. We grab our gear from the van and suit up near the road. Marco is wearing double tanks and all kinds of cool technical cave diving gear. Me? I'm just wearing my normal scuba gear and a few extra flashlights. The walk-in was plenty long and hot enough when I wasn't wearing my dive gear.
That water is gonna feel so good.
Marco gives me some last words of advice before I take the plunge. I think I'm more worried about the 10-foot drop into the water than the dive itself.
Cliff diving! Woohoo! Yeah! Oh, that's great.
The water's extremely clear. I adjust my camera lights and follow Marco down below the earth. As we enter the cenotes cavern, I realize that I'm truly heading into another world. This is not my area of expertise. I follow Marco carefully and pay attention. We've brought some humongous lights to help illuminate the cavern for photography, and they really help show what it looks like. It's beautiful. The tunnels were formed by water rushing through and dissolving the soft limestone. But the intricate decorations hanging from the ceiling, called stalactites, can only form in a dry cave. Thousands of years ago, during the last ice age, the water levels were lower, and these very caves were bone dry. That's when these impressive stalactites were formed.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
On a visit to a dry cave, I can observe the actual growth of stalactites. But it's pretty slow. It works like this.
When it rains up in the rainforest, the water percolates through the limestone, and along the way it dissolves a little bit of the limestone. Then it drips from the roof of the cave, and over thousands of years, each drip leaves a little bit of limestone behind, forming an icicle-like structure called a stalactite. They get longer and longer and longer with time. But the water continues to drip, and eventually it hits the floor of the cave, forming a little bump. And that bump gets bigger and taller, forming sort of like an upside-down icicle called a stalagmite. If you wait long enough, the two of them keep getting longer and longer until they connect into what is called a column.
At the end of the Ice Age, the sea levels rose, and so too did the groundwater levels in the Yucatan. Soon, these huge subterranean caverns filled with water, leaving the stalactites frozen in time. In some places, the caverns have huge air pockets where the water doesn't go all the way to the top. Here we can surface for a breath and take a look around. Some of the cenotes can even be explored by snorkelers. Good buoyancy control in the cavern is essential. The limestone formations are incredibly beautiful, yet fragile sculptures. The formations took thousands of years to form, but a single careless fin kick could destroy them in seconds. So we must kick gently and stay off the bottom. The floor of the cenote is covered in super fine silt. Swimming too close to the bottom would stir it up and reduce visibility to zero, which could be very dangerous. As I follow Marco deeper, the water starts to get weird and blurry looking. Many of these underground rivers make their way to the ocean. At some point along their journey, the water transitions from fresh to salt water. Salt water and fresh water have different densities. The interface between the two different densities can cause an optical condition called a halocline, where the water appears blurry. It's a weird, swirly, foggy haze. I follow Marco down below the halocline and into the salt water. I can taste the salt on my lips, and the temperature is about 5 degrees warmer. Soon we reach the Swiss cheese room. Down here, a chemical reaction with the salt water eats away some of the limestone, creating thousands of holes in the rock and the unique Swiss cheese appearance. It's a completely different kind of formation than I saw in the freshwater part of the cavern. As we swim into the far reaches of the cenote, we eventually reach a point where we can no longer see sunlight from the opening. This has now become true cave diving, a much more dangerous activity. Here we find a sign warning divers to stop and go no further. People have become lost and drowned in these vast labyrinths. This is as far as we go. Turning around, we head back out towards the entrance. Just before we reach the light of day, we find some Mayan pottery on the bottom, probably thrown into the cenote as an offering to the gods. The Mayans believed that the cenotes were pathways to the underworld. Offerings of gold, food, pottery, and even humans were made to the gods through the cenotes. With my scuba tank getting low, the time has come to leave the cenote, so I head back to the surface. In the shallow water just below the jungle, tiny fish come over to check me out. Some of them nibble on my hair and ears. They must be really hungry if they think I look like lunch.
Wow, I can't believe all the cool things I saw in this cenote. Who would have thought that there's so much amazing stuff hiding under the floor of the forest? And even though I'm done with my diving for the day, I think it's time for one more dip. Woo! Most fish are completely harmless, but there are a few species of extremely venomous fish that can sting. In many cases, this venom is so powerful that it can actually kill humans. The most dangerous fish in the world live on Pacific coral reefs. Let's go take a look.
Heading down, I begin my search for venomous fish. Most are well camouflaged and hard to find. With much assistance from an experienced dive master, I find a stonefish well hidden in the reef. It can change color to match its surroundings. Unless you know exactly where to look, you will never see a stonefish until it moves. Incidentally, touching a stonefish like this is dangerous. The reef has a few dangerous characters, and the stonefish is by far one of the most dangerous. The expertly camouflaged stonefish is the deadliest fish in the world. Its dorsal spines contain a highly toxic venom. Its body is shaped like a blob, and it hobbles more than swims. Sometimes stonefish bury themselves in the sand. They're ambush predators, holding perfectly still for hours, waiting for something bite-sized to swim by.
The stonefish has a sting so powerful it can kill a grown man, and the pain is incredibly severe.
The stonefish has a slightly less toxic relative called a scorpionfish. It can still sting humans, but it's rarely fatal. It's just really painful. A small group of damselfish are hovering near the reef. But nearby, watching and not moving a muscle, is a scorpionfish. His perfect camouflage is the result of skin that can change color to match the surroundings. The The only thing that gives him away is the slight movement of his gills as he breathes. On top of his body, his dorsal fin contains the venomous spines, the armor to back up the camouflage. He's watching the damselfish, who are blissfully unaware of his presence. Soon, a damselfish comes too close. Not far away, I find a lionfish hiding in the coral. If those needles all over the fish look sharp, I can assure you it's because they are. Not only that, each one is like an independent syringe ready to inject venom into any animal foolish enough to try to eat a lionfish. Almost nothing can prey on these fish once they're fully developed. During the day, they generally don't do much, but at night, things change. A small fish on the sand is blissfully unaware of the predator emerging from the darkness. Like its namesake, the lionfish pounces on prey and easily consumes its victim in a single gulp. Small fish don't stand a chance. Not far away from the reef, an area of rubble and sand provides a habitat for a well-camouflaged predator. The spiny devilfish is almost invisible if it doesn't move. But the hunting has not been so good here, so it's off to a better spot. The devilfish crawls along the bottom using modified pectoral fin spines as feet. The spiny devilfish sees a potential snack. Unfortunately, a line-cheek wrasse saw it too. The devilfish is not pleased. Not far away, a scorpionfish is doing its best to look like a rock. A damselfish barely escapes, but not without injury. The scorpionfish goes hungry, but the spiny devilfish caught some luck. The injured damselfish has taken a turn for the worse. Although the stonefish, scorpionfish, and lionfish are the most venomous fish in the ocean, they actually account for very few injuries to people. The fact is that if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone too. Many more divers are injured by sea urchins, jellyfish, and crown of thorns sea stars than by venomous fish. But that's a story for another day.
Don't go away. Jonathan is going after one of the coolest sharks around, the Greenland shark.
We often think of sharks as creatures of the tropics, living in clear, warm waters near coral reefs, or perhaps prowling the shallows near a beach. But sharks live all over the world, in all of the oceans, from the tropics to the Arctic, from the shallows to the deep sea. This is one such animal, the Greenland shark, named after the place where it was first seen. This massive carnivore lives in the coldest water on Earth, the icy depths of the Arctic Ocean.
But you don't need to go all the way to the Arctic to see one of these sharks. In recent years, divers have been getting surprise visits by Greenland sharks right here in the St. Lawrence.
In the remote Canadian town of Baie-Comeau in Quebec, Greenland sharks come into shallow water during the summer. They enter a narrow, deep bay where the surface is darkened by tannins from river runoff. The visibility is not very good. I'm going out to see if I can dive with one of these monster sharks in the St. Lawrence. My guide to diving with the Greenland sharks is Sylvain Serrois, a local dive instructor and dive boat operator. He's been diving with the Greenland sharks for many years.
So, Sylvain, how do we get the sharks to come over to us underwater? Do we have some bait or some chum or something?
We're not going to use some bait. Those sharks are curious. They are predators. They want to know what invade their territory. So they're going to come to see us.
Wait a minute, you're telling me that they're just going to come over out of curiosity?
Yes, we're stranger in their territory, so they're going to investigate us, turn around, and go back to their daily routine.
Wow. Well, this I gotta see. Let's go diving.
Let's go diving.
Dry suits take diving to another level of complexity.
We begin suiting up to dive in the chilly water of the St. Lawrence. I need a dry suit to stay warm because the water rarely goes above 40 degrees. That's cold. I jump into the water, grab my camera, and head towards the bottom.
Merci.
But something is wrong. The water's not cold. It's nearly 60 degrees. Sylvain starts banging a pair of rocks together. He believes this will attract the sharks because they're curious about the sound. I see a kind of fish called sand lance, but no sharks.
So this time no luck, Jonathan?
Nothing. We went down, we sat at about 65, 70 feet for an hour, and we looked all directions into the darkness, and I do mean darkness. And we saw nothing.
I'm not one to give up easily, so we head out the next day to try again.
Well, it's the second day of the trip. So far, 4 dives, 0 sharks. Needless to say, shark diving is not always predictable.
I enter the water again with my fingers crossed. We head to the bottom, engulfed in near darkness. The bottom's covered in beautiful anemones, and a crab scurries away from my lights. Sylvain does his best to attract the sharks, clicking his rocks together, but nothing shows up. The water's just too warm.
55 degrees at the bottom. 55, yeah. Another dive with no sharks. Normally I'd be thrilled with water that's 20 degrees too warm. I mean, who doesn't love warm water? But these are Arctic sharks. They like really cold water. So if I want to find any sharks, I gotta find some cold water. And that probably means we're gonna have to dive deep.
The next day, we move the boat a little further from shore. Down on the bottom, it's so dark my camera can barely produce an image of Sylvain in the twilight at 110 feet. But good news, the water's cold at this depth. We only wait a few minutes and then, out of the darkness comes a big shape. It's a Greenland shark! I can't believe it! Just like Sylvain said, it's coming over to give me a look. No chum, no bait, just pure curiosity. What an odd-looking shark with a big round body and a small mouth filled with rows of tiny razor-sharp teeth. Most of my encounters with sharks are in warm, clear water. It's so weird to be swimming with a huge shark like this in cold, murky water. This shark is more than 10 feet long, but it's only a small one. Greenland sharks reach a massive 21 feet, making them among the largest carnivorous sharks in the world. Yet studies suggest they grow extremely slowly, less than an inch a year. So this 10-footer may be 100 years old. And that's nothing. Researchers think the Greenland shark may live to be 200 years old. Even though it's said that these sharks don't see well, this one appears to be watching me, his eye following my every move. The shark stays with me for 15 minutes, swimming slowly and not presenting any threat to me at all. He just seems curious. But soon he picks up the pace and I can no longer keep up. He swims into the gloom and my dive is over because I'm low on air. Sylvain and I head back to the surface.
Woo! I've finally seen a Greenland shark! We decided to go a little deeper, 110 feet, just so we could get into that colder water. And when we got down there, it was freezing cold, and then out of the darkness came the big, huge Greenland shark. It was incredible!
On the way back to the dock, I still can't believe what an amazing encounter I just had. Sometimes all the effort is worth it in the end.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
You might not think of sea stars as being very intelligent, and you'd be right. But you might be impressed by some of the amazing things they can do, especially considering they don't have a brain.
Starfish, more correctly called sea stars, live just about everywhere in the ocean, from the tropics to Antarctica and everywhere in between. They come in all shapes and sizes, from fat and stubby to long and skinny. This brittle star walks with a coordinated effort, using its rays like legs. But most sea stars get around using hundreds or thousands of tiny tube feet on their underside. This is a northern sea star living in the coastal waters of New England, and it's a predator. It's hunting a scallop. It's a drama played out in slow motion as the sea star moves in for a grip on the scallop's shell. But the scallop is not defenseless. With a mighty blast of water, the scallop jets away to safety. So the sea star wraps itself around a mussel. Mussels are attached to the bottom and can't get away. The sea star uses its strong tube feet with suction cups to pull the mussel open a tiny bit and digests its victim by injecting its stomach inside the mussel. Picking up the sea star, I can see that it has the mussel firmly in its grip. But not all sea stars feed on mussels and scallops. A basket star feeds on plankton in the water. It has finely branched arms that act like a net to catch the tiny bits of food floating by. it positions itself to be able to grab as much plankton as possible in the current.
Some sea stars eat something even more surprising. Come take a look.
Exploring a reef in the tropical Pacific, I find a crown-of-thorns sea star dining on the coral. This thorny, armored sea star is one of only a few animals that can digest living coral. It wraps itself around a coral colony and eats the polyps, leaving a dead, bleached coral skeleton behind. Here's a healthy colony of plate coral. And here's one that's been eaten by a crown of thorns. Outbreaks of these sea stars have been known to kill entire reefs. Carefully picking one up to avoid the sharp and venomous spines, I can see the stomach which the sea star inverts out of its mouth to digest the coral outside of its body. These sea stars are the second largest in the world, growing bigger than a dinner plate. But if you think these are big, wait until you see the largest sea star in the world.
To find it, I've come all the way to British Columbia. I'm looking for the giant Pacific Sun Star, and you won't believe the size of this thing.
In the cold, murky waters of the Canadian North Pacific, I swim through beautiful gardens of sponges, anemones, and soft coral, searching for a giant sun star. And then, down on the bottom, I find what I'm looking for. It has up to 24 arms, more properly called rays, and reaches 3 feet across. This is the world's largest sea star. Compared to most sea stars, the giant sun star is a speed demon, cruising along the bottom in search of its favorite food, other sea stars, and the occasional sea cucumber. Here, a sea cucumber makes an emergency retreat to escape this hungry sun star on the move. A 1,000 miles south on a reef in the tropics, I find a blue Lynchia sea star on the bottom. Like the vast majority of sea stars, this one has only 5 rays. With tiny tube feet on its underside, this sea star barely seems to move, but when I speed things up with time-lapse photography, Lynchia sea stars appear very active, moving about and grazing the bottom for food. But even more curiously, they're polite, restraining from walking on top of each other. Like bumper cars, when one Lynchia touches another, they each go the other direction. It's all very civilized. In an hour, a Lynchia on the move can travel several car lengths. Sea stars are amazing animals. They might look like they're just sitting there doing nothing, but they survive by hunting for food, and they do that in many ways, from catching it as it floats by to chasing it down. They're such good predators that sometimes they can destroy entire reefs. It goes to prove that just because something is slow doesn't mean it isn't up to something. You never know where a sea star is going to turn up. Underwater photography is a fantastic job. Although I enjoy diving all over the world, I have to admit that exploring coral reefs in clear water is the most relaxing and peaceful part of my job. There are all kinds of wonderful animals to meet on coral reefs, such as a pointy lionfish, or a curious octopus looking me in the eye. I never get tired of watching anemone fish, though. Outside of the world of diving, very few people had heard of anemone fish until Disney and Pixar came along.
In the film Finding Nemo, an anemone fish plays the starring role. In real life, these little fish are a lot different from their Hollywood portrayal. I mean, other than the fact that they don't actually talk. But you may find these colorful little fish quite surprising. Join me on a dive to meet some real anemone fish.
Anemone fish are found all over the tropical parts of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. They're quite common on coral reefs, so it won't take me too long to find one. Searching a reef on the Pacific island of Yap, I soon come across a pair of orange fin anemone fish, frolicking in an anemone that looks like a shag carpet. They're not afraid of me at all. I can swim right up and look them in the eye. There are 28 different species of anemone fish, all of which are very colorful, but the clown anemone fish, sometimes called the clownfish, is probably the most beautiful. This is the species that was the basis for the character in Finding Nemo. Anemone fish get their name because they live in a toxic anemone. This lush carpet has venomous tentacles that sting most fish. But the anemone fish is covered in a special slimy mucus that keeps the anemone from stinging it. Because of this adaptation, the anemone fish can live protected by the anemone, happily playing in the very tentacles that would kill other fish. Anemone fish are not the only animals that can live in the anemone. Cleaner shrimps hide here as well. They eat by cleaning the parasites from the fish, and in exchange for their services, the fish graciously don't eat the shrimp. But it's hard to relax when you're battered around by hyperactive anemone fish all day long. The protection afforded by the anemone is the reason why the anemone fish aren't afraid of me. They know that the anemone's stinging tentacles keep them safe. If another fish, like this damselfish, comes near the anemone fish become territorial and chase it away. They protect their anemone just as much as the anemone protects them, so it's a good relationship. And if a fish gets too close, the anemone gets a meal, using its venomous tentacles to sting and disable the fish. This fish is lunch. The anemone might look like some kind of weird plant, but it's actually a simple animal with a mouth in the middle. It's basically a jellyfish that can't swim. The anemone is a formidable ally to the anemone fish in more ways than one. They use the protection of the anemone to keep their eggs safe, too. The female anemone fish deposits her eggs on the reef under the edge of the anemone. Then her subservient males take over. The males provide all the egg care. The female just sits back and watches. In any group of anemone fish, there's always one anemone fish which is the largest. This is the dominant female. In anemone fish society, the females are the boss.
One of the most interesting things about anemone fish is that they're all born male, but as they mature, some will completely transform into females.
Only when the dominant female dies will the next male in line get the chance to transform into a female and become the head honcho. Until then, all the smaller anemone fish in the anemone are subservient males. Truth is stranger than fiction, as it turns out, and as my dive comes to an end, I realize that anemone fish are even more fascinating than Hollywood would have us believe. The animals of the ocean truly are remarkable.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to go into the water with 30 hungry gray reef sharks.
Many people seem to think of sharks as killing machines that go crazy if a single drop of blood touches the water. Gray reef sharks are one of the most aggressive sharks in the world, and they travel in schools of dozens of animals. When I dive into the water with these sharks, the splash gets their attention, and they come over for a look. They quickly size me up and realize that I don't look like food. Scuba divers not only don't look like fish, but don't act like them either. The sharks soon get bored and move on.
But what would happen if there was blood in the water? Will the sharks have a feeding frenzy? Will they attack everything in sight?
To find out, I've traveled to Yap, an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, where large numbers of gray reef sharks patrol the reefs. The water is crystal clear, an ideal place to perform an experiment with sharks. I can keep my eye on them from a long way away. The experiment begins with some leftover fish that we will use as bait. I place this bait into a plastic crate so it will create a scent in the water, but the sharks won't be able to reach it.
Let's go find some sharks.
Soon, Captain John and I depart from the dock and make our way across the lagoon to the outer reef, home of the gray reef sharks. On site, I lower the ladder and we discuss our experiment.
So, John, you and I are going to be down on the bottom. We're going to go in first, right? And we're going to wait for Mike to put the bait in. Is that the plan?
Yeah.
I'm working with two experienced Yapese divers who are going to help with my experiment to find out if sharks will form a feeding frenzy if we put a lot of bait into the water.
Can I see this on the surface? What?
First, we prepare our dive gear. And I get suited up. Next, John rolls into the water. He heads to the bottom and attaches a rope to a dead section of reef where we won't hurt the coral with the crate full of bait. Now it's my turn to go into the water.
Here you go.
Mike throws the bait into the water with the rope attached, and I follow it down. The fish are the first to figure out what's going on. They feed on the little scraps coming out of the crate as it makes its way to the bottom. John is pulling it down by the rope, so he doesn't need to swim with the crate among the sharks that are lurking. Once it hits the bottom, I move the crate to a hole in the reef with John's help. The first part of my experiment is to see if the sharks will find the bait if they don't actually see it. It only takes about 5 seconds for the sharks to find the bait hidden in the reef. More than 30 sharks surround me as they take turns swimming under to investigate the source of the smell. If there's one thing that sharks can do very well, it's smell things. And they smell dinner for sure. The sharks can't get to the fish where it's hidden, so I move it out into the open. I leave the wire cover on. Surely this will drive the sharks crazy, and they'll start attacking the crate. Well, not really. The sharks seem to know that they can't get at the fish, so they just keep circling. One bumps my camera, probably an accident because I'm too close to the bait. Well, if that doesn't drive the sharks into a bloodthirsty feeding frenzy, maybe removing the top of the crate will produce the expected result. I open the top and stand back. Now the sharks are free to feed all they like. It doesn't take long for the sharks to figure out that something has changed. I can see their excitement level increase. They're swimming a little faster and investigating the crate more, but they still aren't going into a feeding frenzy. They look pretty civilized to me. Finally, one shark makes a bold move and sticks her head right into the crate for a tasty piece of fish. Once all the other sharks see that, they start rushing in for their own bite. Now the sharks are getting really excited. They all want to get a piece of fish before it's all gone. But this certainly doesn't look like a feeding frenzy to me. The sharks are pushing and shoving each other a bit, but they aren't biting each other, and they haven't paid me any attention at all, even though my camera is stuck practically right next to the crate full of fish. In all of the excitement, one of the sharks grabs one of the tripod legs on my camera. Watch it again from another angle. I'm definitely glad that is just a piece of plastic and not my arm. But to be fair, I have the camera practically inside the crate, so the sharks are grabbing anything that looks biteable in their competition to feed. After all the bait is gone, the sharks return to normal almost instantly. They go back to slowly patrolling the reef and pretty much ignore me. As my tank gets low on air, I swim out into the blue to get a few last shots before I head up to shallower water to decompress below the boat.
That was incredible. So many sharks. Gray reef sharks, silver tips, black tips, and yet I still have all my limbs. Who can explain it? Well, You know, it just goes to show you, sharks are not bloodthirsty killers. They're just fish.
Later, on my second dive at the same site, we search the reef for souvenirs. As the sharks feed, they often lose teeth in the process. Sharks have a never-ending supply of new teeth, so when they lose a few, it's not a big deal. I find a few in the cracks below the spot where the crate was sitting.
And here they are. They're pretty small. They don't look like much, but they sure are sharp.
So, I tried to make a feeding frenzy, and it didn't work. I didn't get eaten alive, and the sharks actually seemed very much in control. I proved something important.
Sharks are not stupid. They eat fish, and they have a pretty good idea what a fish looks like. Divers are just not on the menu. Because of this, shark diving has become a safe and popular activity where people can get up close and personal to these amazing predators. Woohoo!
All over the world, tens of thousands of divers go diving with sharks every year. It's exceptionally rare for anyone to be bitten. Most people find the experience not just exciting, but interesting. Sharks are beautiful animals and perhaps nature's most evolved predators. Yet we can watch them from very close range without being attacked. You would not be able to get this close to lions or bears without being in great danger. It's just another incredible thing that can only happen in the ocean, and another reason I love the blue world.
Meet Jonathan Bird, one of the world's top underwater nature cinematographers. Traveling the world on assignment for all the major networks, he is an Emmy Award-winning authority on the underwater world. In freshwater or salt, reefs, wrecks, or caves, Jonathan documents the world beneath the waves. Welcome to the Blue World.
The American lobster may not look all that tasty, but this large crustacean that was once considered a nuisance bycatch is now considered a delicacy around the world. Although they're shipped to restaurants everywhere, they come from the cold waters of the North Atlantic, mostly from New England and eastern Canada.
I want to find a really big lobster, so I've come to Eastport, Maine, right on the Canadian border, to hunt for a monster.
Lobsters hunt at night, so they like to hide in holes in the rocks during the day. This is what you normally see of a lobster during the day, just a couple of claws sticking out of its den. With some gentle prodding, the lobster will come out to defend its turf. Lobsters are extremely territorial and often fight each other for prime dens. I have to be very careful of the claws. If this lobster gets a hold of my hand or fingers, it can easily break them. This lobster has a larger claw on the left side. This is called the crusher claw. The other claw is the pincher or ripping claw. The crusher claw tells us that this lobster is left-handed, clawed. When a lobster gets this big, it demands respect. Maine is the lobster capital of the U.S., and Booth Bay Harbor is one of the most popular places to visit if you want a fresh lobster dinner. It's also the home of the Maine State Aquarium, where I'm learning a little bit about the life cycle of lobsters. I'm venturing behind the scenes in the Bigelow Laboratory, where they conduct research on lobsters. Researcher Amy Hayden Rodriguez introduces me to some of the unusual lobsters in their collection.
Now, most lobsters are not red. That's the color they are when they're cooked. In the wild, lobsters are more this color, sort of an olivey color, maybe with a little bit of green and some orange. Now, every once in a while, however, you'll come across a lobster that looks like this. This blue coloration is an extremely rare pigmentation found 1 in every 3 million lobsters. And I have to say, they are cool. Now, if you want to talk about rare genetic variations, this one takes the cake. This one is called a bicolor lobster, and you can see that the color is divided right down the middle. One side's blue, the other side's kind of a pale yellow. These bicolor lobsters are so rare, only 1 in every 100 million of these are born this color. That is one rare lobster. This female lobster has something very special going on. If you look underneath her tail, it's full of eggs. The female incubates thousands of eggs under her tail for up to a year before they hatch. And then when it's time for them to hatch, she releases the eggs out into the water. They hatch with little larvae that swim off into the water to become planktonic lobsters. Lobsters don't grow very quickly. And just to give you an example, this is about a 1-month-old lobster. Just old enough that it has settled down to the bottom after being plankton. But from this to the next phase takes a long time. This little guy, this little guy is between 1 year and 2 years old. It takes a long time for a lobster just to reach this size, and this is nowhere near market size yet. Incidentally, they pinch. Thank you. Now this one is just barely old enough to be a legal lobster for a lobsterman to catch, and it's probably 7 years old. So it takes 7 years just for a lobster to be big enough to catch. So you can imagine how long it takes those really big ones to get 3 feet long.
A few hundred years ago, lobsters were incredibly abundant.
In fact, after a big storm, the beaches would be covered in lobsters washed up by the waves.
Back then, lobsters were considered cheap food for poor people. How times change. Lobstermen catch lobsters using a simple trap, the design of which hasn't changed much in 100 years. The large round opening in this trap is where the lobster enters the trap. If they're undersized, they should be able to get out this little rectangular escape hatch. Down at the dock, I see the crew of the Catch-22 sorting their haul for the market. I go down with my camera to check it out. Lobsterman Todd Plummer and his crew have told me that I can go out with them to see what a day of lobstering is like. The sternman stuffs bait bags with herring as we cruise offshore to haul some traps. The coast of Maine is ruggedly beautiful, but the inshore areas are a labyrinth of lobster buoys, each connected to one or more traps. Finally, we arrive at one of the areas where Todd has set some of his 600 traps. Todd checks each trap for keepers, that is, lobsters that are legal size, and throws back the shorts and other bycatch like crabs. Because this is done by hand, none of the short lobsters or bycatch is harmed. His sternman bands the lobster claws so they can't attack each other in the hold. In the next trap, Todd finds a female lobster with a notch in her tail.
That's a female notch right there. Let me see. Female. And you can see it's notched here. Right flipper.
Let me just get a close-up of that.
The V-notch was put here by a fellow lobsterman so that everyone will know she's a good breeder and let her go. This is how lobstermen protect the future of the industry by ensuring that there are always lots of egg-laying females out there.
We're not allowed to keep that. See, it's blue.
I want to see just what it looks like underwater when hauling traps.
gotta love dry suits.
I don my dry suit for a dive off Todd's boat. This water is too cold for a wetsuit. At last, I enter the water and descend to the bottom. With the assistance of a winch from above, the heavy trap takes off into the gloom. At the surface, Todd checks for keepers and then sends it back down. Inside another trap, a lobster's trying to get out through the escape hatch, but he's too big. Many times, in fact most of the time, lobsters don't even go into a trap, but walk right on by. After filming a few wandering lobsters, I decide to head back up so Todd can get some work done. Lobstering is a tough business full of hard work and long days. Todd gives me a chance to try his job for a while.
All right. All right, ready?
I get lucky by pulling up a female lobster with eggs.
Oh, yeah.
One with eggs in there.
Oh, let's see. Oh, this is going to be good.
And it needs to be notched.
And it needs to be notched. Oh, this is great. This is a great lesson right here. Okay, I got my measure. Got my measure. Let's find the first one. Oh, well, this is the first one. We just go right to the egg one.
Okay.
Now, this one has eggs, so maybe you can tell me what we do with
What you need to do with it is if it's female and has eggs, obviously it's female. You need to notch the tail legally.
All right, hold
Like
it.
this.
Okay, hold it.
Yeah.
Hold it. We got to get a shot of this. All right, Carrie, get in there.
Right in. Now you have a notch.
Okay.
You'll never be able to take that lobster again.
Okay.
So that's for our future right there.
All right, so that's going to tell every other fisherman that this is a good egg-bearing female and leave her alone.
Right.
All right.
This is safe for life now.
Okay,
So,
I'm going to set her free. Okay, ready? Never to be eaten by people, but only to lay eggs. All right. Off she goes.
My time as an apprentice lobsterman taught me how hard these guys work for a living, and I also learned how efforts like V-notching have made lobstering one of the few fisheries that really makes an attempt to ensure the long-term viability of the species. American lobsters are one of the more interesting things to see on a dive in New England, and they're among the largest crustaceans in the world. They're fun to play with, and when they see their reflection in the camera lens, sometimes they can get pretty territorial. As interesting as they are, though, I still don't want to eat one. Everyone knows that I love sharks, and I've spent a lot of time watching them and filming them. You may have noticed that sharks very often have hitchhikers, a peculiar fish hanging on for a free ride. 24 hours a day, sharks often seem to be plagued by many of these freeloaders. Being a big, tough tiger shark doesn't make you immune to the attention of these fish. The bigger the shark, the bigger the freeloader. They're called remoras, and they don't limit their attention to sharks. Any animal from the massive whale shark to dolphins, whales, and even sea turtles may have a remora or two attached. Although at first these fish may seem more like parasites, they actually perform an important function. The remora gets some of its meals by picking real parasites from its host. They actually help keep their host clean and healthy. Remoras also take advantage of a shark's messy eating habits, feeding on scraps which escape the shark's jaws. The remora attaches to its host using a strange-looking sucker on the top of its head. This is actually a modified dorsal fin, changed over millions of years of evolution to form a suction cup.
Got him! Here is a remora. On the top of its head, it has a suction cup. You can see all the way around the little flap of skin that allows it to form the suction cup to stick onto other fish. And on the suction cup, it has little ribs, and they're smooth in one direction and sandpapery rough in the other direction. This is actually their dorsal fin, which has evolved to become the suction cup. So this is the top. Even though it looks like it's upside down right now, that's the top of the remora. So this underneath is the belly. That's the belly. Now watch this. If I let it stick onto my hand, it'll grab on, and even when I'm out of the water, it can hold its own weight. So now we've done enough. I think we'll let this little guy go. I actually don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but we're gonna let it go. First, I'm gonna unstick. Here we go. Ready? Here we go. All right. Swim, be free.
Remoras may perform an important function for their host, but this is not to say that they don't bother them. I've traveled to the island of Yap to try a little experiment with sharks and remoras.
Right down below the boat is a school of gray reef sharks, and some of those sharks have remoras on them. We're gonna feed the sharks and get them really excited. Wait till you see what happens.
I drop down below the waves to join the sharks, which are already swarming around the reef looking for some hidden fish. The sharks get really excited when we start feeding them. As they bump against each other and compete for food, many of their remoras get knocked off. After the excitement dies down, these remoras find themselves homeless, swimming around without a host. Now they need to get back on a shark, but this is not as easy as you might think. This remora is stealthily approaching a shark, but notice how it's careful not to touch the shark. If the shark takes off before the remora sticks on, the remora can't keep up. Here's what happens when a shark can feel the remora. It turns away and the remora can't get a grip. This is how we know that the sharks don't really like the remoras. Given the chance, they'll take off before allowing a remora to attach. Maybe they tickle. Soon it tries again, this time with another shark. Getting a free ride is not as easy as it looks. I spend a few minutes filming the remoras. Fortunately, remoras don't find divers particularly attractive, so I don't need to worry about dodging them. Maybe it's because I don't have any parasites to clean. Maybe the scuba bubbles are too loud. As I end my dive and head up to the boat, I'm again amazed by the creatures of the ocean. I've seen remoras 1,000 times on dives all over the world and never given them much thought. It turns out that they have a fascinating life, and we've probably only just scratched the surface in learning about them.
Don't go away. Jonathan is about to investigate a ton of friendly stingrays.
The stingray. It sounds like a weapon from outer space. It even looks a little like a spaceship, but actually it's a flattened fish with wings, a close relative to the shark. But stingrays are almost never dangerous to people because they spend most of their time on the bottom of the ocean hunting for clams and worms in the sand. Southern stingrays live all over the Caribbean.
And nowhere are they more common than here, Stingray City on Grand Cayman Island. This is one of the most famous marine animal encounters in the world.
The Cayman Islands are just to the south of Cuba in the Caribbean Sea. These islands are a diver's paradise with lush reefs and amazingly clear water. But it's not just divers who come here. Each day, dozens of cruise ships come to the Caymans loaded with tourists. Many of them come to interact with the stingrays, and that's why I've come here. My guide will be artist and marine biologist Dr. Guy Harvey, who operates a shop here on Grand Cayman Island. I stopped by to get a look at some of his famous paintings of marine life. Dr. Harvey takes a few minutes to show me his technique and his famous signature.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys doing today?
Great. How about you?
And then early the next morning, well before most ordinary tourists are awake, with Dr. Harvey and his daughter Jessica as my guides, I head out to Stingray City in hopes of observing hundreds of stingrays schooling in formation.
Well, Jonathan, hopefully there'll be nobody out there when we get there, and we can observe this phenomenon of the schooling stingrays, this is the only place in the world you'll see it happen.
Stingray City itself is a series of shallow sandbars on Grand Cayman's North Sound. When we arrive and drop anchor, there's nobody else here.
It's pretty deep.
I'm in the water for just a few minutes when, off in the distance, a squadron of stingrays comes right at me. We have the stingrays to ourselves for a while, but soon enough, other people start to show up. By mid-afternoon, hundreds of tourists have arrived to experience direct contact with the stingrays. The stingrays come here not for the contact with people, but for the never-ending buffet. The tourists, like all good guests, always bring something for lunch. A little fish or squid, for example. By feeding the stingrays, humans have actually altered their natural history here in the Caymans. Normally, they're nocturnal animals, feeding at night and resting during the day. But things are different at Stingray City, as Dr. Harvey explains.
By feeding them all day long, what we've done is change that. They go to sleep at night time because they don't need to forage, and they come here in the daytime. So the whole deal arrangement of behavior, feeding behavior, has been altered.
You could never do this with a truly wild stingray. These stingrays have been fed, and they're used to people, and they're not afraid. Normal stingrays, they take off, but these guys are looking for a little bit of a handout. So that's not really the only reason we can get this close to them. But still, the interesting thing is they are wild animals. They come to this place to be fed, but so do the animals that eat them. So they can become victims of shark bites, they can get hit by boats, cut up by propellers. So it's a pretty dangerous place still, even though it looks like it's just an aquarium. They don't call them stingrays for nothing. That's the stinger, or a barb. It's just a really sharp spine at the base of their tail, and it's their only means of defense. When they get attacked, it's the only thing they have is a little poker.
They use their stinger to protect themselves from their predators, sharks.
You know, for a big shark, this is like coming to Burger King.
And this is a perfect example because this male has lost his tail and half a clasper, probably to a shark. But he's doing all right. He's doing all right.
All right, we'll let him go.
The key to catching them, so I'm told by the experts here, is you got to get in front of them. But they keep turning on me. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, turning. Here we go.
There you go.
There we go. No, don't turn. Don't turn. Don't turn. No. He just jumps right in there. It's like wrestling an alligator.
This is the big one. You ready? You ready?
Yeah. No, I gotta catch him myself.
Whoa! That is a big one.
Hello! That's a love bite. The most important part of this is to keep their head underwater, because obviously they can't breathe if you lift it out of the water. Jessica has a good example here for you. If you look on the stingray right behind the eye, there's a giant hole. You might think it's the gill, but it isn't. It's called a spiracle. And it's a little place where they can inhale water and then they pump it down into the sand through their mouths. And what they do is they use it like a jet. They blast little holes in the sand to hunt for prey.
Yep, so people won't tell this.
Oh, no. There's a little piece of fish. Little piece of fish we got going here. And it smells quite fishy. Here you go. Whoa, hey, yo, take it easy. There's a lot of inhalation going on that.
There's a lot to learn about stingrays, and Dr. Harvey leads a group of scientists who capture, measure, and tag the stingrays to learn about the impact of human interaction. They inject electronic chips into them so they can study them over many years. Since the tags go under the skin, they never fall off, and they don't interfere with the stingray's natural behavior.
It works. We got 100% tag retention, which is really good for a long-term study on a population like this.
Dr. Harvey's research has shown that the same individual stingrays stay here year after year, and the bigger, more aggressive rays tend to get more food from people, so the smaller ones still have to do a lot of their own foraging. He also found that predators like sharks keep the population of stingrays under control. As for the human impact, it seems that both humans and stingrays enjoy the interaction. They both get something out of the deal. There is no doubt that Stingray City is special, a magical place where the creatures of the ocean and those of the land can meet and find common ground.